today we're going to talk all about oil and acrylic paint, the differences between the two. I've been using both types of paint for so many years and I keep coming back to both. They really are each amazing in their own right. So today I just want to talk about the differences between them, when you might want to use one over the other, and the pros and cons of both. Okay, so first let's talk about the oil painting pros. So one of the biggest pros for oil paint is that it dries really slowly. When you're doing realism or other types of blending, oil paint is incredible because your painting will stay wet for a long time. That means you can go back and keep working the area, add more paint, and keep blending, and it doesn't dry immediately. Now, on the other hand, acrylic dries really fast. Now, we'll talk about the pros of that in a little bit, but for now, the pros for oil paint is that it does stay wet for a long time, being great for blending and realism, whereas acrylic dries really fast. Another oil paint pro is that it's not made of plastic. It is just pigment and oil, so it's a much more like natural material. And outside of solvents, you don't necessarily have to worry about like fumes from oil paint because it is just pigment and oil. Whereas acrylic is made of plastic, and there are some fumes when it's drying, like formaldehyde and things that can be created in the air because it is plastic. So that is one thing to consider. Oil paint is a little bit more natural. Acrylic is made of plastic. Another pro of oil paint is that it can be seen as higher quality or more sophisticated sometimes in the art world. Now, this idea is a little outdated and not as relevant anymore, but there are still a lot of people that prefer oil paints because it is such a tried and true type of paint. Whereas acrylic may be seen as less sophisticated, maybe more juvenile sometimes even. Again, that consensus isn't the same anymore, but a lot of people may still question, if the acrylic paint is as high quality or, worth as much money maybe. So that is something to consider. Another pro of oil paint is that it has a really thick, beautiful texture. Even when oil paint just comes out of the tube, it is just so beautiful and luscious and thick, and it's really a positive painting experience. Now, acrylic, on the other hand, is a little bit more thin. So again, there are pros to that we'll talk about. It's not as satisfying of an experience with painting. The colors are thinner and more plasticky, and it just feels different than, the oil paint, like thick texture. And then another pro of oil paint is that it dries glossy and smooth. It has a natural gloss to it because of the oils in the paint. Whereas acrylic dries matte and a bit flat looking. So they are very different, and again, pros to each option, but I do like that oil paint has a natural like gloss and finish, and it just dries smooth and shiny looking. Okay, let's talk about some acrylic pros. One amazing pro of acrylic paint is that it mixes with water, which is free and easy to find. So with oil paint, you have to have some kind of medium, such as an oil or a solvent. I am solvent free with my painting practice, but it's a lot more difficult, and if you're a beginner, it might be easier to use a solvent with oil paint, and those cost money, and they're not readily available in your tap, in your kitchen sink. So I like that acrylic is, you can start really easily with little materials. You just turn on the water and you have your medium. Oil paint, you have to figure out what medium you want to use, spend a little bit more money and time and thinking about that. And of course, you can wash your paint brushes with water as well with acrylic. Whereas oil, you have to have, something to clean your brush, and it is more of a ordeal. Acrylic, there are no solvents. So that is a big benefit if you have kids or pets, or even for yourself, because solvents do give off fumes. So if you're worried about the fumes and don't want to try the solvent-free options with oil paint, then acrylic is a good option. You can just use water. Another pro of acrylic is that it is a bit cheaper to buy the paints. Oil paint is very expensive, and acrylic is not cheap either, but I have found that it's definitely cheaper than oil paint. So something to consider if you're on a budget. Another pro of acrylic paint is that you can paint over it with acrylic or oil. With oil paint, you can only paint over it with more oil paint, but acrylic can be a nice underpainting for your oil paint, or it can just be an acrylic painting. So it's very versatile with, layering the types of paint. Acrylic is really easy to clean up. Again, because we're using water and the paint washes out of the brushes really easily as long as you don't let the paint get crusty and dried on there, the cleanup is pretty fast and easy. Oil paint is definitely a lot more of a process. Again, you have to clean your brushes really well with like an oil or a solvent or have another system going on. And I usually have gloves, like there's just more, it's harder to get out of clothes. Acrylic, easier to get out of clothes, easier to clean your brushes, just overall less messy. Acrylic paint is also thin. So as I mentioned earlier, oil paint is pretty thick and like luscious, which can be a pro. But also, because acrylic is thin, that is great if you like to do lots of layers and they dry really fast. So this is great for people who do certain types of paintings that would require a lot of layers and building up color, and even doing like hard edges and things is easier with acrylic. So the thinness can be a plus. And as I mentioned, it dries fast, which is a really good pro if you have like a deadline to meet. Like say you need a painting done tomorrow, you can do your acrylic painting and it will dry really fast, you know, within an hour. So it's great for deadlines or, you know, doing lots of layers. If you want to do a quick underpainting and then you can paint right over it soon after. So there's just a lot of benefits to it drying really fast. Oil, on the other hand, takes a while. So if you have a deadline, yeah, you need to be careful because your painting will probably be wet. And if you need to do layers, you have to, you know, wait a day or 2 or 3 for that layer to dry before you can do another layer. There's a lot more like planning and time involved with oil paint. Acrylic, it dries super fast, so you can move on. And it's also great if you don't like the painting, you can paint right all over it, you know, immediately after. So yeah, that's a benefit. Acrylic is also really portable. Again, because you're using water, it's easy to pack it up in a bag, take it outside or on a trip, and oil paint is a little bit more of a process. Still definitely doable. People bring them all the time on trips, but you just have to think a little bit more about like cleanup and mediums and solvents and how to travel with that. So acrylic is really easy to throw in a bag, you know? And one last pro for acrylic is that in my experience, I feel like the colors fade a little bit less than oil paint. Now, apparently they have the same light fastness rating, which means, you know, how fast the colors fade after it's dry. They're supposed to be the same, and there are things that you can do with oil paint to prevent, you know, the colors from fading as much. So I always try to do those things, like get artist grade colors, avoid certain colors, things like that. But I still will say that like a year later after I've done a painting, the acrylic looks exactly the same and the oil has faded a little bit. And it can be really frustrating with oil paint. So that is a really good benefit of acrylic, is that it looks vibrant and beautiful and all of that, you know, for years on end. And oil paint, you have to be a little bit more careful with the types of colors you use, the brand, make sure it's artist grade, which is really expensive. So acrylic, you can get like cheaper colors and they still look so good a long time later. So just one thing to consider. Okay, well that is my overview. Again, I absolutely love acrylic and oil paint equally. Right now I'm mostly an oil painter, but I really do see so many benefits to acrylic. Yeah, I just am always, you know, wanting to explore both options more and incorporate them both into my practice. So I would absolutely love to hear your thoughts. What do you use? What do you like? What do you not like about these two types of paints? And why do you use the one that you use? All right, well thank you for watching, and I hope this was helpful, and I hope you have a wonderful day.